For a killer price of 6,500 euros, the CFmoto 450 MT stands out as an affordable, truly mid-sized, off-road capable, twin-cylinder adventure bike. It fills a niche that other brands chose not to see. Well, and you know what they say. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Hello adventurers, my name is Diogo Guerra and this is OFFroad-OFFcourse. Today we will be reviewing this beauty, my brand new 450 MT. I got this bike only about 2 weeks ago, but I already took it on one of my 4-day off-road tours, so I already have some thoughts to share. I know a lot of you will consider this blasphemy, but in my opinion the 450 MT feels pretty much like a Yamaha T7, but smaller and more convenient. The engine has the same architecture, but smaller. The ergonomics are similar, yet the seat height is lower. And the weight of 195 kilos, fully fueled, confirmed by Red Raven from ADV Head, is indeed slightly lighter. Now, I know it sounds silly to sacrifice almost half the horsepower to get a benefit of 10 or 12 kilos, but the reality is, this bike does feel lighter. The suspension is also similar. Both bikes have KYB forks with 200 mm of travel, and while the 450 MT has more adjustability, its forks are only 41 mm thick, instead of the stronger 43s you'll find on the T7 or even the CRF 300L. Regarding the shocks, I don't have enough information to compare them, so I won't. Both bikes have 21-inch and 18-inch rims, but here the 450 MT shines because it has spokeless, tubeless rims instead of the tube types, and that's great, I think. In other words, it is slightly inferior in some aspects, but then it makes up for it in practicality and ease of use. And we cannot forget the price. This thing costs half than some of its bigger competitors. And I think that's a very important thing. Well, enough talk about the specs, let's see how this thing behaves out there in the real world. The 450 MT is an absolute blast on secondary roads, mountain passes, back roads, etc, etc. The ergonomics are great, the brakes are excellent, and the engine is smooth as butter. The handling, I think it's fantastic, and it has a lot of poise, and it feels very precise around the corners, and it's definitely a top contender within this class. The elasticity of the engine lets you push every gear deep into the redline, and this gives this bike a sporty riding style. Exciting, but at very survivable speeds. If, on the other hand, you choose to ride it slowly and peacefully, then this bike will reward you with a blissful feeling of comfort, silence and smoothness. Riding on the highway is by far the least interesting thing you can do with this bike. The top speed will be around 150 km per hour, inside the red line, and so it means that the cruise speed will be somewhere around 115–125. Even though the 450 MT will feel more comfortable than your average dual sport, like a CRF 300L or even a KTM 690, it is definitely not a bike I would recommend to a road-oriented rider who plans to spend a lot of time on highways. I didn't buy this bike thinking the bike was perfect. I actually thought it was very flawed and that it would need a lot of modifications to feel, as good as I wanted. But to be honest, the more I ride it, the less I feel like I need to modify it, and the more I want to keep it stock and just working exactly the way it is. Of course, that will not stop me from eventually upgrading, because that's part of the fun, but that's another story.
So, what I like about this bike is that it was cheap, it feels well constructed. Like, I have no reasons to feel that this bike is not well constructed. It's working really, really well. Everything is. And I like that it's lighter weight than a real adventure bike, a big adventure bike. Like, The difference is not that big. It's only like 12 kilos or something between this and a T7. But it does feel a lot lighter when you're maneuvering the bike. It feels more relaxed. It feels more convenient. And you know, that's just better. It's I like it. Things that I don't like, because you have been hearing a lot of people say all the good things about the 450 MT, and I agree with all of them. Like, this bike really is outstanding. Oh, we don't like water, do we? um, but let me talk about the things that are not so bueno. So, for instance, the suspensions. This suspension is top class inside this class. So, these suspensions are way better, in my opinion, than the ones on the, what's its name, the NX500, or maybe even the Transalp. I don't know. They feel really well, but they have their limits. Like, and the limits that I'm finding is that it has been hard for me to tune this suspension in a way that it feels just right on every terrain. So of course that's impossible, but on most suspensions that I've been using along the years, better ones, like, I can get like this nice compromise between something that works on sand, something that works on mud, something that works on loose rocks and whatever. And this one feels either too stiff for some things or too soft for some things. It depends on how you adjust it. Yeah.
I truly believe that even though the 450 MT has less power than the usual adventure bike, even though the suspension is not top shelf like some adventure bikes, I don't think that on the normal events that normal people join, I don't think that that will make a difference. The guys on the 450 MTs will be doing exactly the same things at exactly the same speeds as everyone else on the bigger, more expensive motorcycles. Mark my words. Now, the bike is very pretty, of course, but the question on everyone's minds is this thing still going to be a motorcycle in 2 years or just a piece of scrap? And of course, I don't know the answer to that. But after riding this bike for a couple of weeks, 4 of those days were off-roading quite a lot. Everything that I can touch and feel and look at looks quality. Nothing rattles, nothing makes a sound, nothing is coming loose. Everything is well put together. Like, the quality of the materials seem very good for the price, or very good overall. There's nothing here that tells me that this thing is going to just fall apart. And this engine, oh guys, I love this engine. It's so smooth, it's round, mechanically healthy, smooth, it's full, concise. It's cold. Like, I've never ridden a motorcycle that is so cold. Like, on an average speed, on an average off-road track that is not very hardcore, like, the temperature of the coolant sits around 70 and 80. On road, 60s sometimes when it's a cold day. Am I the only one thinking this is a bit weird almost? Like, it's not the KTM engine for sure. Please never change. Please, you are perfect just the way you are. There are only 2 things I can criticize at this stage. The first is that I found this little sideways slack on the throttle. The second problem I noticed is very typical of fuel-injected Euro 5 motorcycles, which is a jerky throttle. When you accelerate, the bike jumps from 0% acceleration to 5% acceleration. There's no 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that forces riders to use the clutch every time they go off and on the throttle to smoothen out the power delivery. This probably can be fixed with a simple remap, but while it doesn't happen, I think it's going to be a pain in the butt for the novice riders that are not very used to using the clutch. Every time they accelerate, it sucks. Now, to finish this section, there's something that it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's worth mentioning. Every metal component on this bike seems to have been cast. I don't know a lot about metallurgy, but I don't think these parts, or most of them, were cut, CNC cut, like you would see on a more modern motorcycle. Maybe some of you will be able to read more into this than I actually can. Personally, I don't think it's an issue. I don't know. The bike has some nice features. My favorite one would be this button here that allows you to turn on and off the off-road mode while the bike is riding. All you have to do is to click the button, go off the throttle for half a second, and it's done. This will turn off the traction control and also the ABS for the rear wheel. I actually tried the traction control on this thing off-road, and I was surprised with how good it was, which is unusual. Like almost all bikes, there are exceptions, but almost all bikes have very bad traction controls for off-road, in my opinion. The dashboard is quite complete. It gives you a bunch of cool information like you know, the voltage, the time, the distance, the average fuel consumption, the instant fuel consumption. It's nice. Oh, and you have the coolant temperature. This one is really important, and of course the gear that you are on. Inside the main menu you have a few more options, but honestly I didn't find it very interesting. Except this functionality here that allows you to connect a phone and two intercoms to the bike, and this will let you manage calls and music using the dashboard. Somewhere in here I also found an option to connect this thing to the internet and get firmware updates. I like that the seat comes out easily and that underneath you have the battery, the air filter, and even some room for tools. I like the adjustable windscreen. I like that the front brake caliper has 4 cylinders in it and it's a radial caliper. I dislike that the original bash plate is so thin that I immediately decided to change it. I like that the clutch is lighter than an hydraulic clutch, somehow. I like that all the lights are LED, including the blinkers. I like the retractable mirrors, and that the bike comes stock with these handguards. They are not the strongest, but you know, they will do the job for now. I like that the subframe is bolted on and that the rear shock is easily accessible, and that the swing arm is connected to the frame on the outside, like a KTM 690. I don't like, however, the quantity and complexity of fairings around the front. This thing will probably be a nightmare to put back together. I like that the bike has a height adjustment, but I dislike that the side stand cannot be adjusted as well. So, after all this is said and done, I have to ask, who do I feel this bike is for? And I think this bike is for the humble adventurer. Humble enough to know that most times you can do more with less, or at least the same with less. Humble enough to know that riding inside or close enough to the speed limits, it's probably a good idea on the long run. And humble enough to accept that there are limitations to his skill and also to his necessities. A humble and wise adventurer, you know, like me. Or someone who dreams about owning, let's say, an Africa Twin or a T7 or whatever, and just wants a stepping stone or a testing ground before he commits to that bike. And yeah, I think now I am done. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you want to see more stuff about this motorcycle, please stay tuned because I own it, so I'm going to do a lot more videos about that. And if you enjoyed this one, please don't forget to like, to subscribe, to hit the thingy and to share. See you next week and happy rides!